when your life experience and what's happening causes you to be aware that you have not enough of something that is important, money or love in a relationship, whatever it is, and the contrast causes you to desire more of that, source becomes a vibrational match to that more. So what happens is, in every moment, because of your ongoing eternal chewing of the data and exposure to the contrast and subsequent birthing of new desires, which are what causes the expansion of all that is, source becomes immediately one with that most expanded idea. Feel that. Feel how that fits with what you knew and know from broader non-physical perspective. So when your life causes you to ask for something more, source immediately becomes one with it. That's why we say, when you ask, it is given. We would like to use even stronger words. When you ask for something, source becomes that expanded experience. So the question that this Art of Allowing workshop asks is, are you allowing yourself to go with the flow? That's literally what allowing means. I'm allowing the fullness of who I am to go toward what life has caused me to ask for, or I am not. And if you are not, you can feel that you are not. In other words, when you go with the flow, you feel the evidential energy or emotion that gives you that indication. In other words, positive emotion, joy, passion, love, appreciation, that feeling of exhilaration, that feeling of eagerness. All of those feelings are your indication that in this moment, whatever you're focused upon has got you going with the flow. And when you feel negative emotion, whether you call it overwhelmment or frustration or stronger emotions such as blame or guilt or fear or despair, those negative emotions, no matter what label you give them, are always the same indication. You're not going with the flow. You are not, in that moment of that negative emotion, allowing yourself to stay up to speed with that which you have become. And so when you get out there and you're active in life and you're living a lot of life with a lot of different people and you're launching a lot of rockets of desire, you have to do a lot of work to stay up to speed with what you're asking for. And when you do, you feel the thriving of your being. And when you don't, you feel the resistance within your being. Can you imagine taking your canoe down to the river? You've got your paddles or your oars already in it, and you set into the river, and then you point it deliberately upstream, and you paddle very hard against the current. And our encouragement is that you go with the flow. Turn the thing around and let the stream carry you. But then our physical human friends say, well, Abraham, that just seems lazy. And we say, really? It seems like going with the flow to us. And you say, no, I've been taught that if I work really hard, my rewards are greater. And we say, how long can you keep that up, working against the flow? How long can you push against the current? And you say, I don't know how long, but I'm willing to try. Because I've been taught that in struggle, there is valor. And that there is no real gain without pain. And we say, but how long can you keep that up? And you say, well, not very long, it's sporadic. I work really hard, and then I get exhausted, and then I just drift hopelessly for a while. And then I work really hard, and I try to get more marks on the chart, and I compare myself with others who are working very hard. And Abraham, we have a whole different thing set up here where we compare each other on the basis of our struggle. And we give those who struggle the hardest the best mark on the chart, no matter how it turns out for them in their physical life. In other words, we honor hard work and struggle. And we say, but how long can you keep that up? We notice that you can't keep it up very long. And then you become a world that is comparing your valor or your struggle rather than letting yourself go with the natural flow. How is it that you have come to not trust your ability to choose? How is it that you have come to the screwy conclusion that if it feels like grace and ease and love and well-being, that there's something wrong with it, and that if it feels like pain and struggle and hardship, that there is some sort of positive reward in it? Every thought that has ever been thought exists. Even when you think a thought, the thought begins to pulse and vibrate, which means that thought is thinking. And law of attraction causes a coalescing of these thoughts so that there are many currents within this greater stream of who you are. But when you begin to tune in to the vibration of that greater current of who you really are, and you let that be your dominant quest, you learn to feel for that flow, and you learn to, as often as you can, turn in the direction of that flow. What begins to happen is you begin to live life in the way that you've intended. You begin to benefit by the resources. Oh, that's a good word, resource. Of the resources of your connection with that which literally is source. You begin to tap in to those greater resources, and you begin to reap the benefit of all that you have lived before. You are such wise, powerful, deliberate creators, and you've come here with such enormous intent. And when you let yourself go with the flow of that intent, life is immediately delicious for you. Now, we've noticed that along this river or current, when you go with the flow, there are those emotions of love and ecstasy, those emotions of appreciation, those good feelings emotions. And in all of that is your perception of your freedom. On the other end of this emotional scale, where it feels like despair or fear, depression, it is your perception of lack of freedom or disempowerment. And we've noticed that every emotion that you feel is a degree of that. In other words, the more free-flowing you are allowing yourself to go, then the better you feel. And the more you are restricting that flow, the worse you feel. Another way of saying that is, the more you let yourself go with the current of who you are, the better you feel. The more you don't let yourself go with the current of who you are, the worse you feel. For example, when you really love you, you're really going with the flow because Source really loves you. When you really love someone else, you are really going with the flow because Source really loves that person who is the object of your attention. When you despise yourself, you are really going against your flow. When you feel worthy, you're going with the flow. When you are loving, you are going with the flow. When you acknowledge that someone is rude to you, you're going against the flow. When you acknowledge that someone is nice to you, you're going with the flow. So Abraham, you say, how can I help it when someone is rude to me? Aren't they, in their rudeness, causing me to go against the flow? Nothing that another does affects your flow. It's your attention to what they do that affects your flow. Knowing the flow as we do, and knowing what the stronger stream is doing for you, and knowing what the true current is, we say to you, you just have to know that when you don't feel good, no matter what the reason of it, you're going against your own flow. And if you go against your own flow, it beats you up pretty good. That's why we say, how long can you continue to do that? Do you know when you go against your flow, it will give you cancer. It will give you a heart attack. It will give you a car accident. Not that law of attraction is doing it to you, and not that the flow is doing it to you, but you can't keep that up. You cannot go in opposition to the current that is you without it taking a negative toll on you. You just can't do it. And we want to, by way of our really effective sales job, appeal to your logic and help you to understand that there is no virtue in going against your flow. There is no reward in putting your hand on the hot stove and just learning for it not to bother you quite so much. Everyone in our family has always leaned on the hot stove. It's what our family does, you say. It's just who we are. Abraham, we live in the real world where we have to put our hand on the stove. And we say, of course you do, but you don't have to leave it there. Of course, you are touching up against things that are giving you indications, but they are just that. They are indications about whether you're going with the flow or whether you're not going with the flow. And we want to convince you that going with the flow is who you really are. You are the flow. You are source. You are love. You are well-being. You are clarity. You are creator. You are all of these good feeling things. And in any moment of time when you're not allowing that, well, you're just not letting yourself go with the flow. You're not letting yourself be who you are. And when you don't let yourself be who you are, you feel the discord within you. And then, dear friends, you have become so incredibly creative in the way you explain the business of not going with the flow. You say, our society is evolving into things less wanted. We say, no, it isn't. Your society is evolving into things more wanted. You say, our society is going to hell in a handbasket. And we say, no, it isn't. Your society is getting more clear in every day about what it wants and launching more rockets of desire than ever before. And Source is riding those rockets of desire, so the future is brighter than it has ever been before. You say, I cannot get to where I want to be because of my placement of birth in this experience. I was born to the wrong parents, or into the wrong society, or at the wrong time, or on the wrong side of the railroad track. And we say, no, you weren't. You're born in exactly the right place. You say, I must have been bad in a past life, and that's why things aren't working out so well for me now. Or you say, someone has put a voodoo curse on me. Or you say, I just cannot get there from here. Or here's the really big one that is rampant in your environment that could not be more false, but so many people believe. It's incurable, you say. This is an incurable disease. And we say, where do you get this stuff? Oh yes, we remember. You've got your boat pointed upstream. You're paddling upstream, fighting against impossible odds, trying to use your action or your behavior to compensate for the vibration that is pointed in the wrong direction. And then you conclude, I can't get there from here. And so we'll give you this. You can't get there going about it that way. You cannot get to well-being by fighting the current. We want to give you our point of view of what the current really is. It's the true current of who you are. It's the current of well-being. It is the only current that flows in this non-physical to physical universe. In other words, the only source that is coming forth to you is this stream of utter well-being. There's not a source of sickness, there's just the not allowing of the wellness. And there's not a source of confusion, there's just the not allowing the clarity. There's not a source of evil, there's just not allowing the well-being that is you. There's just fixating on things and focusing upon them long enough that I activate it in my vibration long enough, that law of attraction responds to it long enough, that I get a manifestation of it long enough, that then I focus upon the manifested reality long enough, that then it becomes a dominant vibration within me. And so for longer and longer and longer periods of time, I hold myself in vibrational resistance to the well-being that would be there in evidence in my experience if I were not doing that thing I do so often that keeps it from being allowed by me. Then the thing that we most want you to come away from this gathering with a decision within you. No matter where I am on this emotional scale, the fact that I'm doing it on purpose and that I'm deliberately turning to go with the flow is the only thing that is necessary. Don't ask yourself to go from despair into joy instantaneously. Just get pointed in the right direction and let the current continue to carry you. You are magnificent creators who could not be more worthy, who have come forth into these physical bodies with the powerful intention of life pointing out to you things that from your perspective would be an improvement. And Source so knows that you should know that there is no one in all of the heavens or on earth, there is no one who should know more clearly what is a better choice than you. And Source knows it so completely that when you ask, it is given every single time, no exception. And so this seminar just asks the question, are you now willing to allow yourself to be the recipient of what Source has agreed you should have. And that really is what going with the flow is.